You're hanging out in the House of Sunny podcast, where it's always sunny, mostly because of your host, comedian and YouTuber, Sunny Lohman. Want to know what Sunny and her friends are thinking about this week? Well, here she is, Sunny Lohman.
Hey everybody, welcome to the House of Sunny podcast. I'm here with Doug in ghost form again. What's up, Doug?
Not too much. How are you today?
Tired?
Yeah, I can
see that in my puffy face, which is also puffy from bread.
I'm going to make a kind of promise that by next week I'll have video.
Oh, good.
It's an almost promise.
Okay. You going to lose 10 pounds in the next week?
Yeah, I'm on a crash course. That's right. Liposuction, the whole thing is coming.
I was going to do a royal report today, but forget it because there's so much news. And that's really just what we're going to talk about all day today, everybody. We're just going to go through the news because, I mean, it's no surprise it's October, a couple weeks before the election, that we're getting all of this shit. But we're going to start by kind of chronologically going back in time to the weekend where a huge news story happened in that a guy murdered a Trump supporter. A guy working for NBC. That's insane. Like literally murdered, like first-degree murder is what he's being investigated for. So that happened. And then Project Veritas the next day did a drop on the Colorado Democrat Party, basically being run by a dude who's a total Antifa communist radical talking about killing people. So we're going to get into that. We're going to talk about Amy Barrett's confirmation, some stuff that's come out about that. Like that's like almost the slow news this week is that
just a Supreme Court justice. Yeah, just no big deal.
Just a Supreme Court justice. When we have murder and mayhem, and then we have the Supreme Court justice. Okay, then we have this incredible email trove of Biden corruption that Giuliani dropped, which is, there's some fun stuff in there too. There's some crack pipe smoking and some sex with strippers and whore video, stuff like that.
That guy's killing it, man. That guy's got a great life, by the way.
His life is awesome.
Kind of envy him in a way.
Some people think of that as like a great life, but God, no. Sorry. Gross.
Crack, whores, money, Chinese.
Money, lots of money, drugs, sex. Yeah.
Yeah, baby.
He's living the glamorous life.
He's living like in a rap video.
Right. Exactly. He's every
he's a boss.
Black man's hero this morning. Okay. Now, with that drop came an incredible amount of suppression of that story by Facebook and Twitter and, everybody else. So that now has become a second story related to that story. And then we have the Obama SEAL Team 6 Iran controversy that also has come out. And that's like almost a non-story based on the rest of this story. So, okay, we're just going to go through those stories one by one and talk about it. That's what we're going to do with the show today. So hopefully you'll stay with us. My microphone's about to fall off the desk here.
Oh.
I'm going to tighten that.
Tighten it up.
There we go.
It's tight.
It's tight. All right.
So yeah, man, how crazy is this? This week is like level 10 for everybody. Like if you're not already freaked out by the COVID stuff, which by the way, that's obviously we could talk about for 10 hours.
Oh my God, there's COVID news. Just
COVID crazy. And then all of a sudden level 10 politics is just, I don't even know. My head is spinning.
I wish all we had to talk about today was coronavirus and Meghan Markle. I miss those days.
Or Suits.
Yeah, Suits. TV shows.
I got a lot of those.
You've been watching a lot of TV?
Yeah.
To stay away from all this.
Yeah, I don't really watch the news anymore because I'm so immersed in it all day that at night I've been watching a lot of film noir and Amazon shows. Yeah.
All right, well, let's get into it with the Denver shooting. maybe I'll share my screen here and see if that works. I don't really have a lot of stuff queued up, but I did want to say, if you want to know anything about the Denver shooting, the person to optimize screen share for video clip. Okay, let's do that, whatever that means.
There you go.
Person to follow is Michelle Malkin, who lives in Colorado, and she has been such a badass about this. Let me see if I can make myself bigger. I probably can't. So, you know, she's writing an article basically saying this is a media political assassination. So what happened was this dude, so as usual, people on the right, the patriot people, planned a rally to go out and wave their flags and say, we support Trump, we support America, we're Americans, we love our country. And of course, the radical, jackboot, thuggy, Democrat army came out to counter protest. And it's not even a protest. It's a rally of people getting together to go, yeah, USA. That's not really a protest. But that can't be allowed. So people, trained agitators, we know that that's happening, show up to try to pick fights with people. And Antifa has said their whole goal is not necessarily to hurt anybody at this point. Right now, their goal is to get you to fight them, to get video, or the police to fight them, to get video of bad things happening so that they can turn public opinion and get rid of the cops or get rid of you, right? I mean, it's just to make people sympathetic to them. Of course, what ends up happening is they end up doing some shit on video like they did. They shot somebody and killed him. So the creepy thing is that there was this NBC reporter embedded with Antifa, and I don't want to say embedded, that's probably a strong word, but he was with them, he was on that side, and he himself, based on his Twitter and his online profile, is a hardcore, radical, Occupy Wall Street, a radical Democrat, and has been for years in Denver. He works for NBC, the local NBC station, and he, quote unquote, hired this dude to be his security, or at least that's what he's saying. Claimed it was Pinkerton. Pinkerton says it's not them. What's really weird is the lack of information about who this dude is that we still don't have. Right. So 9 News says, oh, we hired that guy through Pinkerton. That was a security guard who shot this Patriot guy. I think I'm getting ahead of myself. I didn't even say what happened. The guy was in a verbal spat with this professional Antifa agitator. The guy was obviously trying to pick a fight with all these people, and all those people were just sort of standing there upset, but letting him yell and rant. And he was like, spray me with that. He used the N-word. He was swearing at them. He was saying, spray me with your pepper spray. Touch me again. You'll find out, like all this weird stuff. Meanwhile, anytime he was touched, it was like a guy in the middle trying to keep 2 people from fighting because he was getting in people's faces, and it was just really awful. The stuff they do, and this all is on video, you guys, and you can see all of this if you go to Michelle Malkin's Twitter. She has a ton of video footage. Anyway, then something happened, and we don't really know exactly what. This guy, one of the Patriot guys, sort of steps out of the frame of the video. We have some photographs that show he ends up getting into some sort of fight with the security guard, quote unquote, who was not a licensed security guard, just some guy who was with the NBC reporter. He gets into a fight with him and at one point slaps him. And what we're hearing is that maybe he was reaching for the guy's gun, the Patriot's gun. And so he slapped him. And meanwhile, he still had his pepper spray in this hand from the previous verbal sparring with this professional Antifa agitator. So he's got his pepper spray here. Guy maybe goes for his gun. He smacks him. He's walking away. Like the photographic evidence is that he's backing up. And this security guard pulls his gun professionally, holding it like he knows what he's doing, just shoots the guy. And as this gun is coming out, The guy sprays his pepper spray in defense, and he gets shot and killed. I mean, Michelle Malkin's calling that a media political assassination, which sounds crazy, but how is it not that? There's some photographic evidence that the security guard and the reporter were standing there sort of talking and saying something to each other while this Patriot guy was in this verbal sparring thing with the Antifa guy. It's really confusing what happened. It's really confusing. And the photographer who turned in her photographic footage of what she had, fast frames of the whole thing, well, some are missing. And then where are those frames? People online are saying, where are those frames? Because she has all these frames, and then these critical moments where we're saying who did what first. Did he go for the guy's gun? Like, that stuff is all murky because this woman held back some of her photographs. And then 9 News says, oh, it was Pinkerton. Pinkerton says, that guy doesn't work for us. He's a contractor, but doesn't make clear, is he a contractor working for Pinkerton? Or like they have nothing to do with it? They didn't say. And probably they're worried about liability, but also I just feel like everyone's a hardcore leftist and is hiding the truth. Like, I'm trying really hard not to just jump to that conclusion that it's,
well, one of the things here is that you can't get news on this, which is part of what you're saying. Like,
yeah,
you have to go to Michelle Malkin and people on Twitter because no one's reporting anything.
No one's reporting it.
And imagine if this were the other way. I mean, there would be, how many cities would be burning right now if this were the other way?
So here's some of it. Here's this professional agitator. See if you can see this. You know, this is the professional agitator here. Off frame, you're seeing this spraying of the pepper spray and the shooting. It's really scary. This is so scary. When Americans can't go out on the street in a major city in the middle of the day and say, I'm for the USA, you can't do that without maybe getting shot. Does that freak you out?
Absolutely. I mean, I would be frightened.
It's so weird living in this history. I mean, this is the shit that you read in history books and you go, wow, weird times back then.
Yeah, like how did it ever get to that point?
Right. And we are living it, and it is bad, man. It is so bad. So bad. Okay. You can't get news on this without going to Michelle Malkin, but go there and see what happened. And I'm trying to just kind of keep up with this story and follow it.
They arrested this guy, right?
They arrested him, and he's for potentially first-degree murder. They arrested the reporter as well and let him go. But it sounds like, I don't know, accessory or I don't know. In any case, the guy, I don't know. I just think all these people need to be rounded up and just, I mean, it is so hard to talk about this because, you know, when you live in civil law and order, you don't just round people up and like, you don't round people up for yelling at people on the street and say, you're inciting violence, you're an agitator, whatever. That's fascist dictator behavior. But when you have now a total breakdown of law and order, and you have Americans who cannot exercise free speech in a major city in the United States in broad daylight, we need to start cracking the whip. And it isn't fascist, it's protecting our society. So it's like weird. I mean, there has to be a shift, and this is an unformed idea, so I'm just going to kind of think out loud about this. But do you know what I mean? Like when people on that side, like what I'm about to show, this Project Veritas drop now is what we're going to go into here, where he
Well, part of what you're saying, though, I've thought about this and written about it a little bit in the past in other contexts, but the idea is that, and this is actually pretty clear in Supreme Court precedent as well, and it's pretty rational, which is, if you just say in your house, oh, I would really like to kill someone or whatever, you have the freedom to do that. Or if you say, well, I'm a communist and I'd really like to see the government overthrown. Okay, you have a right to say that. But if you start to engage in a conspiracy by actually acting towards that end, where you're trying to, let's say, overthrow the government, you're engaged in a conspiracy to threaten or kill other people, you're planning it, you have an organization around it, you have stated goals, you're actually doing it, at some point, and again, this is a slippery slope, and I understand the First Amendment issues here, but at some point, I think you can say, just like you could say during World War II, that person's a Nazi, or, we're engaged in a war. These people are trying to overthrow the United States. If you identify with the Nazis or the communists, you're going to get arrested. Like, we're not going to tolerate this anymore. Now, do I trust the government to make that distinction right now? Probably not. But at some point, when you declare Antifa, or when you look at Antifa and these movements, I think you can rationally argue they're organized, they have arms, they're violent, they're inciting violence, and they're really a terrorist organization. And I think you could designate them that. And if you're going to affiliate with them with that, and they're in an armed struggle and an armed insurrection against the state, I think you have cause to stop these people from assembling. And that might sound harsh, but they've earned it. I mean, this is happening.
Right. I mean, okay.
At least that's the way to think about it.
This is the way that Ayn Rand taught me how to think about these things. It comes down to who's morally right. And yes, terrorism is a tactic, for example. It's not, when you look at the founding fathers and like the tarring and feathering, and which with a lot of founding fathers were against that and thought of that as immoral. But we look back on it kind of fondly and go, yeah, Americans tarring and feathering their city mayor because he's corrupt and he's a Tory and he arrested some patriots or something like that, right? I mean, you can imagine that now. Like, why aren't we? Let's all go to the jail and break Kyle Rittenhouse out of jail, and let's tar and feather and ride the mayor out on a rail. Like, I would be in favor of that at this point.
Right.
Maybe not so much at this point, but at some point I would be in favor of that. It would be ethical, at least, or murkily maybe ethical at some point when you're in a war or you're in a battle for your civilization. I feel like too many people get hung up on, well, it's violence, and so it's always bad in a civil society. Well, not if, and this is, Antifa's so clever, because what they've done is said, it's okay to punch a Nazi. And the truth is that yes, it is actually okay to fight back against fascists in your society. They're right. And if we truly did have a fascist society, this uprising would be moral. Like, it would be a resistance, like the French resistance. We don't look at the French resistance and go, what a bunch of thugs for
Right.
blowing things up and killing some Nazis in their sleep and doing these terrible violent behaviors and being organized and we look back on that and go, wow, they were heroes.
Of course, they were acting in self-defense.
And Antifa's running around wearing that badge. They've put that badge on them. We're the resistance against fascism and against Nazis. And this is what they're telling themselves in their head too, that they're so moral because they're fighting against, but what they're actually fighting against is freedom.
Well, right,
they're
because in their view, everyone except them are Nazis.
Yeah, and I don't know how they get that twisted place, but that's their rationalization. So, but what they've done by taking on that badge and taking on that mantra, all of us who oppose them go, no, it's not okay to punch a Nazi anyway. But that's wrong. It is okay to punch a Nazi. It's okay to be the resistance against actual fascism and tyranny, actual thuggy anarchy and mafioso corruption. Like, it's okay to actually fight back against that violently. You have to, because these people are violent. And so if you don't, they're bullies. You know, it's the same thing with the bully. If you don't sort of stand up to a bully, they're just going to keep going until they have it all. And so they're right that it's okay to punch a Nazi. The problem is they're not punching Nazis. They're punching free, innocent people. So when the free, innocent people stand up and start going, F you, and punch those Nazis, which they are, it's actually immoral. So this guy's a Democrat. I'm going to play this Project Veritas drop that happened the day after the Denver shooting. Project Veritas comes out with this.
2020 is a political revolution. I am going to do everything morally acceptable to win. I will lie, I will cheat, I will steal, because that's morally acceptable in this political environment.
This is Chris Jacks from Our Revolution, a radical left 501c4 organization bent on creating a, quote, political revolution in the United States. Jacks represents the Democratic Party here in Colorado. And Jacks says a Biden administration will be used to advance his political objectives, or else there will be violence.
It's going to take a strategic hit against the 0.1% that's in charge, because that's who it is. It's killing random Nazis in the street, random bootlickers. So you want to do some Versailles shit? You want to do some Antifa shit? You really want to change this country that way with violence? There's only one way to do it. You got to get people that are close to billionaires and start just random billionaires start turning them down. I mean, Bezos at the top of the list. I do think there needs to be a militant group, and I love Antifa for that reason. I love that there's you always have to have somebody that's willing to hold up the flag and say, no, this is the line in the sand, and we're the ones holding that line. But they ain't stabbing motherfuckers like they used to. They don't have to, though, because they used to stab. See?
Yeah.
And that's all we gotta say. No. Guillotines. Motherfucker, that's all you gotta say. Option A, what I'm proposing. Option 2, slicey boys. What are your choices? Which one do you want?
Joe Biden is presumably left-wing, and he's got a functioning signing hand. And as long as there's progressive legislation that comes across his desk, I am confident we can occupy his house. We know where he'll live.
So there you think?
And yeah, he wants to veto Medicare for all. Let him veto it. He's never leaving that house again without protest. Half of the struggle that I have ain't with Republicans. It isn't with the right wing. It's with moderates in the Democratic Party.
They underestimate how many people on the left are organized, trained, armed, and ready to go.
Okay, so you see he's building himself up. He has this moral justification. He's killing Nazis.
It's morally acceptable in this environment, is what he said.
Right. And he's saying two choices. Either you do what I want, or we're going to start killing people. So he's the bad guy, right? Unless, like, if he were actually fighting for freedom. So he were saying, either you free people, or we're going to start killing people. Like, that is actually an acceptable moral position. To be honest,
I mean, no. He's saying if you don't enslave people through Medicare for all and leftist legislation, which pits the state against to control or has the state prosecuting innocent people and usurping their individual rights, then he's going to kill you.
So that's what I'm trying to get across here is it's not the tactic, it's the morality of these ideas and what this guy wants to do. He wants political power so he can control people and enslave them. And if you don't give it to him, he's going to murder people. And he is saying that's ethical. That's morally justified because Medicare for all, is so good. And freedom is bad, according to him. So this is what we're up against. And I just think, at what point do we fight them? At what point are these people considered terrorists and rounded up? And we're not even talking about Antifa and BLM now. We're talking about the Democrats, literally the Democrats.
Yeah, because this is not a guy. Imagine having a discussion with this guy. Is this a guy you would have a argument with and have a discussion and a conversation with to try and convince him that you're right?
He thinks you're a Nazi.
If you disagree with him, he's going to guillotine you.
And not only that, his logic and his brain has to be so murky and twisted and emotional to call himself the good guy. Yeah, he's not a rational person.
Oh, this is a revolutionary.
That's a revolutionary, right? And he's a representative of the DNC in Colorado. He's representing the DNC in Colorado. So, okay, so we had the shooting on the weekend. We had this happen. Project Veritas drop, this is evidence that the Democrats are Antifa. They are BLM. And it's not like we didn't know that, but it's just more evidence that they are. Okay. Should we go from this to judiciary, or should we go to the Biden stuff?
Oh, by the way, and this just before you move on to Biden. So I have a friend who talked to a very intelligent lawyer that he knows who happens to be a Democrat. And this Democrat said, they were talking about Trump or something. And this guy said, it's Trump that's inciting these riots all over the country. And he was just absolutely shocked that this guy would say something like this. So here's a smart, and this is how effective these people have been and pushing this message, that even a smart and fairly intelligent person actually has the view that these riots and the kind of activity that this guy is behind is actually being done by Trump. Isn't that amazing?
I cannot figure, how do you live under a rock like that? I don't even believe that. I think that you have to be so far gone in your hatred for Trump that you're just grasping at things. So let us segue into the judiciary thing, because that to me is kind of amazing too. All of this crazy going on in the midst of the confirmation hearings of Amy Barrett for the Supreme Court. And at one point she said sexual preference instead of sexual orientation. And the internet exploded that was offensive, that it showed that she thinks gayness is a choice and therefore she's bigoted against gay people. And then the crazy thing is that Merriam-Webster dictionary, after she got that question and said sexual preference, they changed the definition of preference, which I got to find this. Where did I post that, man? I got to show this. Or maybe I should just read it, but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But what I was trying to say, where did I post that, Doug? Do you remember?
Yeah. I think it was on your page, but
might have been on my page, because I don't think it's in the Elite Squad. If you guys donate to us, you can go to the Elite Squad. But since that's not going to happen, the heck.
They added the word offensive, right?
Yes. The word offensive was there as a synonym. And then they changed it that moment. Okay, I'm not even getting the story. Isn't that funny? New York Post. Okay, here we go. Let's go to New York Post, because they deserve our clicks after getting banned. Okay, so
they changed sexual preference.
They changed preference to be like, they added an offensive warning before the part saying sexual preference. And then they changed the word preference from meaning orientation or something like that they took that out. They took out any synonym with sexual orientation because they were saying it was sort of synonymous. They took that out. So the Democrats control the dictionary, y'all. That's what shocks me is how, you know what? This is going to be easier if I just do this. I don't know if everybody can see that, but so as recently as last month, Webster's dictionary included a definition of preference as orientation or sexual preference. Today, they changed it and added the word offensive. The dictionary is getting changed in real time, literally an hour or two after she was asked this question and said this. They changed the dictionary and then they came out with this avalanche of, oh my God, she's a bigot. But if you go look, you know, I mean, how's the coordination, Doug? Like, we think that they're just all on the same side, and so it feels like a conspiracy theory, but it isn't. How does a senator ask a question, set her up, the dictionary changes, and then the news avalanche of, look what she said, and just in case you look that up in the dictionary, well, it's not what you thought it was.
Yeah, it's like 1984 level coordination. Isn't that what Winston Smith did? Winston Smith did in 1984. Like, his job was changing history books, I think, right?
Right.
Changing, like going through old history books and changing them. I mean, this is like what we're doing now.
Yeah.
This is like right out of 1984.
It's crazy that the Democrats control Merriam-Webster's dictionary to the point that they just pick up the phone and go, hey, can you just change this definition in there because we're about to avalanche a story.
Aisle 3.
And what's worse, like what you were saying about this person who said Trump is causing these riots. Like, then I see people that I know and that I'm friends with on Facebook who just have redonkulous Trump derangement syndrome coming on and saying, oh, this shows what a bigot this woman is. And, you know, they've already decided that she hates gays. She wants to cancel abortion. They know who she is. She's a Catholic mystical bigot who shouldn't be on the Supreme Court. So they're just picking reasons to hate her and making shit up to convince themselves that they're right. I'm so sick of it. I'm sure y'all are too. Everybody, all of us are dealing with this shit every day. Okay. So that's going on. I think she's holding her own. She seems to be doing a good job. And of course, her confirmation's in the bag. It's not like it's not in the bag, right?
Right. I think it is.
Do you have anything else to report about that?
Well, by the way, Biden and Pelosi are Catholics. Someone might want to point that out. But yeah, I think it's like a done deal. I mean, because there's like no procedural way they can stop it as long as the Republicans bring it to the floor to vote on it. So I think it's a done deal, right?
Right. I think so. So this brings us to the Biden drop. So some computer repair store owner kept a copy of Hunter Biden's hard drive. So what's so messed up, dude, we can't even trust the FBI to deal with the terrorists in our country, Antifa, BLM, and all of this stuff. We can't trust them. They're actually anti-Trump. So they're probably in favor, you know, there's definitely evidence that the FBI is corrupt in favor of Antifa and BLM at this point, and anti-Trump. And so we can't trust them to, like you said, do the right thing. And we can see that the consequence of the fact that we've sort of lost law enforcement in this country is it's just getting worse, and the whole thing is snowballing and people are getting shot. And when is this going to change? I'm super freaked out. I think it's just going to get worse because we don't have anyone in power to deal with this. Even if Trump wanted to deal with it, he's got a crappy FBI, a corrupt FBI that's on the radical Democrat side.
Imagine what it'll be like if Biden gets in. It'll be that much worse because there'll be no checks and balances. Because then the whole Justice Department, rather than having maybe 3 good guys, will have 0.
Right.
It's bad enough as it is right now. We're seeing this kind of deep state bias and corruption always against Trump and his agenda. It's going to be that much worse if Biden returns with his cadre of leftists to I don't know that there's a federal solution. I mean, but the conclusion I've come to is that there's no way out of this federally, that the federal government is never going to reform itself. It's too big. It's too corrupt. There's too much money. They're literally have the power to tax and spend trillions of dollars. And when there's that much money,
it's too much.
There's too many entrenched interests making too much money people will kill for what, a few $1,000? I mean, what will people do for trillions?
Right. That's the thing. Like, it's no shock, right, that we're dealing with this level of corruption when you're talking about the amount of money, for example, that you can make off a vaccine automatically makes me totally skeptical of this vaccine that's coming because the rushing it through and all that, and then the mandating it by preventing air travel or something like that. I don't trust this at all. These people are going to make trillions of dollars off of off of giving a vaccine to 7 billion people, paid for by the American taxpayer. Because, we're going to be buying this vaccine for every African and every Indian and,
Right.
Because we always do. That's how they get their money. It's not that they're going into third world countries and getting third world money. They're going into third world countries and making the United States charitably and in our own self-interest, because we can't have a bunch of people flying in and out of our country that still have coronavirus. It's no surprise that when that much money's at stake, that the jackals descend and that we have this incredible corruption. We're just relying on people to be good people, and they're not. I mean, there's always bad people.
Well, I think Americans, over time have allowed this to fester. And, you've got an evil ideology that's been in the making for 100 years, escalating. At the same time, you have the legal precedents in place for the government to have basically every lever of power open to them to control, to print money, to tax people, to regulate people into oblivion. And that's a really dangerous recipe when you have the only check on that power is some adults in the room and some decent people. And now all the decent people are gone, on top of them having this kind of power. So I don't see, it seems like this is all heading for a catastrophe and some sort of civil war or some sort of break.
Which is dangerous in and of itself.
Reestablish local control at the state level and just we need to get rid of the federal government. The fact that we're all so obsessed with this federal election is proof that the federal government's completely out of control. Why do we even
the SCOTUS
care?
confirmation.
Yeah, people see it as life and death. And in some ways it is. In some ways it's probably overblown, but in many ways this is life or death for many people because of the power of the central government to control so much of our lives that we do have to pay attention to it. We do have to care about these idiots, and we shouldn't. They just should have no power. They should have no control over us. And, it should be up to local people to control their own state government.
If we do have a civil war, we do have this big breakup, we go back to local control, no federal government. Now China just swoops in and takes over. That's the danger. We have created a monster, and not just China, but American wealth and the corruption seeping out of our country, and all of, the fact that we've made China super rich and powerful when they were a backwater of third world disaster under communism. And now they're actually a threat to us. The fact that they can infiltrate our country, the fact that our country is infiltrated by Muslim Brotherhood.
Well, we're already, I mean, spitting into the Hunter Biden stuff, I mean, it appears we're already controlled by the Chinese.
Yeah.
I mean, the implications of this scandal are that, Biden, through his son was being paid millions of dollars for introductions to Chinese executives and
so
for water for him.
Let's say what happened there. Okay, so Giuliani, the computer repair shop guy, gives this hard drive to Giuliani. This is so crazy.
Well, apparently it was left. It was left there and never retrieved. So it wasn't stolen. I believe it was. The theory is that it was, or the claim is that it was just left there.
Well, so what happened was the FBI took a copy of it. They came in with an order and took a copy of it. And then there was another copy made or something that was there and then was given to Giuliani. So on that is our emails proving that he was totally corrupt, that he was getting paid for introductions to his dad, and that his dad did meet with these people that were giving him money. And it's Ukraine, it's Ukrainians. Yeah, and Joe Biden had denied that. He denied even ever discussing anything with Hunter, which is so dumb.
And emails say like, "Hey, it was great to meet your dad. Thanks for introducing us."
Right. Here's your money. And that's both Ukrainians and Chinese. But Hunter was particularly embedded with Chinese people. He was in business partnerships with them so that he could do business in China. And one of the guys he was connected to was a high up in the Communist Party, businessman. China has this rule where, first of all, like, you can't be anything without being a member of the party. So only party members are these big businessmen and are given the right to make money. There's a lot of poverty there. There's still a lot of, anyway. So that guy was partners with Hunter Biden, and at some point he was disappeared, and that guy's businesses fell apart. So that guy was disappeared by his own party not that long ago. But anyway, not before buying favors for the Chinese Communist Party and himself, whatever his business dealings were, from Joe Biden and Obama. So sickening. And there's evidence of this. And then there's also some fun stuff like pictures of him with a crack pipe, having sexual things done to him. And there's like a raunchy 12-minute video on there, I guess, which I haven't watched. Have you watched?
No.
You don't want to see that?
I don't want to see Hunter Biden.
So that is a massive story. And now an offshoot from that is New York Post does this big story about it, and people start sharing it. And then Twitter and Facebook, not only do they suppress that story, fact check it, but basically they don't just fact check it.
It's unsafe.
They call it unsafe, and they eliminate those posts, and then they suspend accounts posting it, which included the Trump campaign Twitter account, Trump's press secretary's Twitter account, Dana Lash's Twitter account, Sebastian Gorka's Twitter account, like all of these right-wing, New York Post's Twitter account, all of these right-wing accounts are suspended for sharing that story. That story was buried. I mean, that's election interference, clear as day. That is curating for political reasons a major news story that harms one candidate. To suspend the other candidate's Twitter account in the midst of that, I mean, and they lied to Congress and said, "Oh no, we're neutral." I mean, we all know that. We all know. Look, this is like nothing new. What drives me crazy is what are we waiting for? I mean, how much evidence do we need before we actually take action about these social media companies? Oh, this is too much. Now we're done. After everything they've done, after the collaboration and collusion to bump Alex Jones off of every platform, When that happened, that's when something should have happened.
Right.
That's antitrust. Whatever. A lot of people on our side are against antitrust laws. But when you have a very small number of people controlling all the information in this country that people get, the news, and they're in bed with a certain political party, in bed, connected, and mutually threatened by. And then you have really who is in charge, who runs the politicians? Big corporations with all their money. So you have big media silencing, trying to crush new media on all of these platforms. And, under the guise of like, it's not safe. It's not safe for Alex Jones to say weird shit and for people to hear that. Think about that. They want to decide what you get to hear and see.
The implication
they want to
that,
decide what's unsafe for you.
Mm-hmm. Unsafe, that it will hurt you.
You can't know about vaccines. You can't think about vaccines.
Right-wing thought is a form of violence by implication. If it's unsafe, it can hurt you.
Who the hell do these people think they are? Like, Americans used to be like, what the heck? We think we get to have all the information and then we decide. We used to take pride in that. And now we're just letting this happen. And it's a private company. I am in favor of these people being crushed under the big government boot at this point. They should be broken up. They should lose their 230 status. This is wrong. This is just so wrong.
Yeah, I think the real violation is the Section 230. They're clearly distributors and not publishers, and they're violating their neutrality.
If we had, we knew this years ago. If that had just been dealt with, we wouldn't be here, and we wouldn't be at the point where we're like, okay, let's break them up. They're obviously a monopoly that is functioning under the dictates of the Democrat Party or their party people. It's like dealing with a communist party. You've got the Communist Party and everybody else. And if you're not part of the party, you don't get to have a Twitter account. But they own it's a private company. Oh my God. They're committing fraud too, because they go out in public and they go into these congressional hearings and they lie.
Well, right. They're lying to their content providers by claiming they're a neutral platform and then changing the terms of service. So all these conservatives that have brought content to them, they violated they're breaching their contract. I mean, so even on those grounds, breaching, and the thing is, you can't really do anything about it because they have so much money and power that, you go to, they're obviously lobbying the Congress because they're clearly violating this FCC Act, yet nothing gets done about them. Why? Because they have lobbyists in Washington that quash any attempt to enforce that regulation.
Not just that, there are politicians there getting money from other companies that want this to happen, so the politicians don't want to, it's all one big club to crush freedom in this country. That's it. So when are we going to fight it? And like today, people want to fight it by leaving Facebook and Twitter. Just like they want to fight the corrupt California officials by leaving California and moving to Texas with all the socialists who are also like the elite, idiots, white, educated socialists who are moving to Texas and are going to vote in socialism, like Joe fucking Rogan. And don't get me wrong, I love Joe Rogan, but he's a Bernie Sanders supporter. He endorsed Bernie Sanders. Oh, isn't it great? Joe Rogan moved to Texas and has this big ranch and he's doing his thing out there and people are going to follow him, and he's living in Austin, which used to be a red city and now is a blue city.
And he's voting for communism.
And he's voting in communism in Texas, y'all. You can't run. You cannot run There's nowhere to go. And history shows us, this is so interesting. People move out into the country because shit, in Rome. Remember this? Like I was saying this, I think like last week or the week before.
Yeah, you build your dacha in the
You
state
go
of
out,
the
you get your
Russian countryside.
estate, you get away from these assholes, you get away from the crime and corruption and Antifa and BLM and the danger that you're in the cities, because you're in danger. And now you have these homeless people and all that stuff too. Like they're ruining and wrecking your life and your society. So just leave and move to Texas or get your ranch. You're out in the country. It's beautiful. You can grow crops and have goats and be like self-sustainable. And, you're a prepper and you got your shit taken. You're like growing tomatoes and potatoes and you don't even need to go to the grocery store. And eventually they will come out to your farm and kill you like they did to people in Rome and like they're doing in South Africa.
Yeah, they'll find you.
You can't run. You cannot run. If you value your children's future, you will stay and you will fight. Wherever you are, stand your ground and stop giving land to these people. So one thing I've been kind of reading about recently is what happened in Colorado. I lived there in the late 90s and the early 2000s. I lived there for 8 years and it was red. The city was red. The state was red. A very Republican place to live. People were cowboys. People were farmers. It was very, very much,
rugged individualism.
Yeah, totally. And there were also a lot of libertarians. That was the other kind of group. But since then, it's gone blue. And I've been reading a lot about that. And what happened was the Democrats passed that. So the Democrats managed to take over something, like they passed the ballot harvesting. And ever since then, no Republicans can get elected. Shock. And every box of ballots found in a trunk seem to be all Democrat ballots. Every time. Amazingly. So once they get their little fingers on voting, they take it over everybody and they run the place and they run it into the ground. And now you have in Denver where the police chief is genuflecting to BLM, where they're not enforcing the law. I have friends who have businesses downtown. The homelessness is out of control. Like what you're seeing in every other blue city is exactly what it has happened to Denver. Meanwhile, the people who live there are still fairly right wing, and they keep passing these, where they vote on things. Like they voted not to have ballot harvesting by a clear margin. They're like, no, we don't want that. And then the legislator just overrides them and makes the law, and they don't care. So you have this majority people disconnected from the leadership, and the leadership is just corrupt. Kind of like what you saw in Virginia, and then where they showed up with their guns. They're like, no, you're not taking our guns. But you had this out of balance where the people in charge, the Democrats, are running people who are majority right wing. Because they had that moment in power that allowed them to just take it over. And you will never get a fair and free election in Colorado again. The fraud is out of control. They steal every single election.
Yeah, it becomes Chicago. It becomes a political
It's
machine.
Chicago. That is what I heard described. It's like it's Chicago. The only way to get rid of that is to rise up and literally take over the Capitol building with guns. That's the only way to change it, because they have corrupted the whole system. So how else do you do it? You can't vote in change anymore. You have to use violence. And nobody's willing to do that. I mean, obviously, we're not that kind of people. We want law and order. We don't want to get our gun and risk our lives and go take over the Capitol building, So it's not going to happen. We're just going to kind of let it get worse and run into the countryside and get an estate, move to Texas until Texas goes blue, and then move to Montana, and then Montana goes blue. And then next thing you know, it's just over. So I'm not sure what I would like to see in Colorado is 1 million Republican march where they show up and they surround, and they make themselves kind of like what happened in Virginia, maybe. I don't know. Something has to be done. The politicians have to get scared. Don't you think? I don't know what to do. What do they do besides rebel and kick out the people, you don't have to kill them, tar and feather them and ride them out on a rail, right? Burn their houses down.
Well, and this was the American spirit. I mean, this is what was going on in our country for generations.
By the way, I'm not trying to incite violence. I'm going to get in big trouble.
Yeah, well, at some point, people will not do anything, I think, until it's right in your face. That's when, and unfortunately it's sort of like no one puts up a stoplight at an intersection until, there's a car crash and a bunch of people are dead. It's just the way people are. I think they're going to have to push it to such an extreme, and again, I think it's the way it's going to play out politically is, it's going to have something to do with probably guns and anti-gun legislation.
Yeah.
There's going to be a point where there's a sanctuary city for the right, and the left is going to try and send the feds in, and there's going to be some sort of battle erupting. I don't see anyone on our side. Unfortunately, the way leftists live for government. That's how their DNA is constructed. They want to control you. Their lives and their sort of moral energy is all derived from the feeling that they're engaged in a struggle of idealism and that they're in this great moral struggle to rectify these great injustices. And so their whole lives and the purpose of their lives is politics and control and power, and they'll do anything to seize it. And, people on our side see government as sort of like a necessary evil, something that unfortunately we have to have, but that's sort of an exception to, voluntarily trading and working and leading productive, happy lives with our families. And we just want to be left alone. And that imbalance, unfortunately, favors that side until there's a battle.
Right.
And that's just the way, I think that's the human nature.
You're right. It's the way it is. It's the way it was with the American Revolution. I think people get frustrated, but there were wrongs going on for quite a while and a lot of discussion about it before anything actually happened. And, like Trump, like you said, Trump has to win. He's the only check on this right now. If he loses, we are sliding straight into, they're going to pass ballot harvesting at the national level. First of all, they're going to eliminate voter ID forever. They're going to make that illegal and racist. Then they're going to go after whatever they want. Free speech, guns, We're going to slide into socialism, universal health care, mandatory vaccinations. And then it will just have to get so bad that people rise up, like we'll become socialist and then people will finally rise up. I don't want that, I'd rather see Trump win and we have some more time. And I think what has to happen is people have to get super active locally. Anybody who cares about this, this election coming up in 2 weeks, please, over the next 2 weeks, take some time and know who you're voting for city council. And even write to them before you vote and say, look, I'm thinking about voting for you, but here are my main concerns. And if you aren't tough on this, equity in the schools and blah, blah, critical race theory, I'm going to come after you, politically.
Well, what's interesting too, Sunny, is that
I'm thinking about taking over the paper here in my town. Like, how can I take over the Laguna Beach paper and start writing, why not, right? And then run that Facebook account.
Well, and it's a lot easier to do stuff locally. I mean, if you just show up, like you're one of the 3 people that shows up, you'll probably get heard and you can have a lot of influence. The interesting thing to me is that most of the outrages and stuff that we're seeing around the country are really happening as a result of local government and state governments. There's I know we're all outraged by the Trump Biden stuff, but what are they really doing? When you look at what's going on in, these blue cities that are really responsible for a lot of the outrages we're seeing and the kind of like local madness, like the shootings and the burning down in these cities and stuff. This is all happening with the tacit enablement of mayors and state politicians and attorney generals that are, the attorney general in Kenosha that's prosecuting Kyle Rittenhouse for defending himself. All that stuff's happening locally. And so, and
where there's
mostly
resistance, it's
states.
local, like it's sheriffs, it's, right?
Yeah. So this is really, I mean, I want to see decentralization, and I'd like to see the end of the federal government, because I think there's a lot of evil. I mean, they're the ones who could really cause serious, horrific, sort of catastrophic carnage, because they have so much power and they control the military and they have trillions of dollars. I mean, what's happening in Portland is kind of a Portland issue. I mean, I hate to see it, and I think it's a result of a lot of national trends, but that is happening in Portland. It's happening thousands of miles away from me, so I don't really care as much. And it's kind of sort of up to them to deal with it. Mm-hmm. And there's only so much those people in Portland can kind of do, because, it's like crazy people in Portland. The people that could really devastate us is if the federal government were to, sort of be overturned and in control by the far left, and start to enforce censorship, at a SCOTUS level, where we have hate speech codes that are endorsed by and are enforced by the federal government, where you can't criticize, like in most countries other than the United States, you can't criticize Islam publicly, or you can be arrested. I mean, that's the way it is in Europe and even in Canada. You can't be critical of certain religions and so on and so forth. So, much less own a gun. So that's the kind of stuff that I think would provoke the worst sort of danger. Right now, it's still local, and I think we can still fight locally.
Yes. So get involved locally. Don't move. Don't run anymore. And don't run off Facebook, and don't run off Twitter. Stay on those platforms and fight. My own Facebook, I had a very steady growth. And then since 2016, I haven't grown a single like on my page. Not one. For years. If that's not shadow banning, how is that not shadow banning?
It's happening my page too. I used to get hundreds or thousands of reaches. Now I post something and I get like 7 reaches and 1 like. I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah, you get put on some list and it's done.
That's it.
I'm not big enough for anybody to really care that much about my page, but I have, almost 10,000 fans, and I just can't get to 10,000. And I've been at the same 9,785 for 4 years. That's insane. That's crazy. But I'm still there, and I'm gonna just stay there. And I do have some kind of reach. And I think we stay there and we fight for it. And, you just have to you have to get active. I don't know. But more importantly too, we have to have Trump in the White House in order to be able to do that. Without that one check. And I think in his second term, I'm hoping he'll get tougher law enforcement wise. I'm hoping he'll get a new, FBI head, maybe. I mean, he'll be able to do more. And he's not perfect, and he's going to pass a $5 gazillion trillion stimulus, which I'm completely against. But he's not in bed with these people. He's not in bed with the media. And the other side has the dictionary.
And they believe 2 + 2 = 5. So they're the math books.
They are so evil. And the equity shit that they're trying to get locally, the critical race stuff. I mean, without Trump in the White House fighting. Like, he's so awesome in that he has stopped critical race theory in the federal government training. That's great. And we need that in the private world, where corporations and schools stop doing this. And that's up to us. So if you work for a company, your kids go to school somewhere, those are your battles. Fight them. Risk your job. You know, have your resume ready. Be always looking for a new job so that you can speak out and say what you think. Stop being silent, and then show up to your school board meetings and your city council meetings. I know it sucks. Nobody wants to do that. Everybody's busy. But that's why we're in the predicament we're in to begin with. We've let that. Oh, and as this is the last thing on that note, we were going to get into the Obama SEAL Team 6 thing. We don't have a ton of time, but first I'll mention this. I'm going to share my screen again because I want you to see Kanye's new campaign ad. Wait, what just happened there? I'm going to do this again. I'm going to stop sharing, start sharing. I shared the wrong thing. Okay, here we go. Kanye is so funny. I shared this the other day, and somebody said, I don't care about Kanye. And I'm like, you should care about Kanye, because this is culture. And not only that, I think that Kanye's whole presidential run is just to try to pull more Black people away from the Democrat Party. I don't think he's trying to win president. Come on now. He's not even on ballots in most of the states. So what do you think he's doing? Like, he's not fighting a practical campaign. There's no way he can win, right?
Yeah, he's saying there's an alternative.
What he's doing, and he's first he was MAGA. Right. First he was MAGA. He's wearing the red hat. He got tons of crap. His wife's career was being affected. Like, we're living in massive cancel culture where you cannot be for Trump. So he had to in order to be effective, he had to take the stigma away from what he was saying and what he was doing. He had to disconnect from Trump. What better way to do that than to compete with him head on? And I'm not for Trump. I'm for myself, right? Listen to this. Hang on.
What is America's destiny? America. What is America's destiny? What is best for our nation, our people? What is just? True justice. We have to think about all these things together as a people. To contemplate our future, to live up to our dream, we must have vision. We as a people will revive our nation's commitment to faith, to what our Constitution calls the free exercise of religion, including, of course, prayer. Through prayer, faith can be restored. We as a people are called to a greater purpose than ourselves. We are not only a beacon to the world, but we should be servants to each other, to encourage each other, to help each other, to lift up each other, our fellow Americans, that we may all prosper together. We have to act on faith with the sure knowledge that we are pursuing the right goals and doing the right things. We will build a stronger country by building stronger families. Families are the building blocks of society, of a nation. By turning to faith, we will be the kind of nation, the kind of people God intends us to be.
I am Kanye West, and I approve this message.
Okay, so
2020.
Like, obviously, I don't agree with anything he said there, except families are great. You know, I'm not religious. Whatever, right? But the point is that here we have a Black dude who is trying to say, hey, we need to get back to like God and family, which is a very conservative Republican message, and he's doing it on his own ticket. I still wish he would have actually created the birthday party instead of running as an independent, because I would vote for the birthday party. I would. I wouldn't be able to help myself. That's actually something Kanye said. I'm not making that up. He said, I'm running on the birthday party or something like that. He's so funny.
But the thing is that the message is one of, like you said, of personal value, that that it's important.
And unity and the country. And I would rather live with a bunch of Christians. I would rather, I grew up in a black neighborhood. I would rather live in a black neighborhood with a bunch of religious, family-oriented black people than what is currently there.
Right, where we have 70% single mothers and
single motherhood, kids running around and like totally neglected. Lots of government money because they don't have help and they don't have families and they don't have husbands. That's freaking awful. And I mean, and for them, for me, for anyone living in that environment. So they would be better off following Kanye. But I think, ultimately I would rather see them pursue regular Western Enlightenment values. But they need a moral backbone. They've lost that. They've been encouraged to lose that, the black community I'm talking about. I like that there are a lot of voices right now trying to get them back into that and trying to be positive role models instead of just all the hip hop, drug dealing, pimping, money grubbing.
The reality is that there's no voice of like secular values in the way that we would push it. So the realistic alternatives right now is the sort of like nihilism, anti-family, mayhem of the current inner city life and the cycle of welfare and poverty and dependence on the central government, or a message that says you're responsible for your own life, you're responsible for your family, take care of these people that you're responsible for, and hold yourself out personally to be responsible and be a good person. And so I'll take that message any day. I don't care if it's faith-based right now.
Seriously. Now, the gloves are off, man. It's anything that is value-oriented and not nihilistic and not anti-freedom is a good thing for people in this country. And you have to get comfortable as an American that people don't agree with you and that they have different viewpoints. They don't have to be perfect. They just have to not be trying to kill you and everything you care about. Yeah. Right? So Trump is not trying to kill me and he's not against me. Yes, he's about to steal trillions of dollars from us, which is bad. But in today's culture, I just don't see it. I can't really expect more from him. He's also getting a ton of crap for not doing enough about coronavirus.
No, the Democrats would be worse. So yeah, his economic policy is a disaster. He's basically like an economic Democrat. But in terms of like his fidelity to the Constitution, to First Amendment rights, to gun rights, and to law and order, and to not have a government that is about socialism and control and the nihilism of political correctness and cancel culture and the evil that represents, that is enough.
Yes, that is enough right now.
That is
I wish it were better, but that's
message.
Where we are. And the fact that he can withstand the media onslaught against him has been heroic. Heroic. I don't know any of the other Republican candidates who would have withstood that, including Ted Cruz, who's pretty tough. But the other day on CNN, he condemned the Proud Boys, who've never done anything wrong. And he said, I condemn the Proud Boys. He just, jerk, did it when they asked him about it. It's like, what the hell are you doing, Ted Cruz? You never give an inch. What are you doing?
Yeah.
And then do you remember when he was questioning Rod Rosenstein and he said, no, I have no doubt that you didn't purposely do that. You're not purposely corrupt. You just weren't paying attention.
Did you see what he did to Jim Comey? Because he did the opposite last week.
He did the opposite to Comey, but whatever. I mean,
yeah.
You know what? He can be wishy-washy. He can give into. So sometimes he's tough and we love him, but he's also capable of just being kind of
cowed by these people. Yeah.
Yes. And he doesn't even get a whole lot of crap. Imagine him in Trump's job getting that much crap. He would have folded like a cheap suit because he's not consistently tough with them. Trump is consistently tough with them. He never gives in. Not even years later, after everything they've done to him and his family. They went after his whole family. They're still after his whole family, including his wife. Who could withstand that? So heroic. We need 4 more years of Trump. And you got to vote in person. It has to be a landslide in person on election night. I hope he wins, man. So, do you want to say anything briefly about the Obama SEAL Team 6 thing, which is kind of weird, and I don't even know if that's real yet?
Well, this is sort of anticlimactic because of, but no, the basic
we can go over
idea.
it next week instead.
Yeah,
if you think there'll be more.
There probably will be more because this guy is supposedly going to be dropping evidence. There's a guy who's claiming that Brennan, Clinton, and Biden were complicit in a plot where Iran was actually hiding bin Laden for about 10 years, and that they entered into a deal to transfer him to Pakistan to enable a sort of trophy kill on behalf of Obama, in 2011, I think, when that
that's
occurred.
What the pallets of cash were for and all of that?
Well, what happened was, supposedly, according to this dude, this Alan Perot, whose credibility is in question, before they could actually kill bin Laden, or when they went to raid his village, Iran had gotten bin Laden out, that there was a double that they killed. It wasn't actually bin Laden, and that's why they destroyed the body. They double-crossed Obama, that they actually didn't kill bin Laden, which is evidenced by the fact that they never provided DNA evidence, that the body was just thrown out of a helicopter because it wasn't the right guy, and that
who believes the burial at sea BS?
Well, this guy was also saying that it's like actually against Muslim practices to bury someone at sea. They have to be buried on land with their face towards Mecca, blah, blah, blah. So that whole thing was a farce, and that in order to cover this up, what had happened, which is that we knew that bin Laden was in Iran all this time, and that they had arranged for him to go to Pakistan as sort of like a trophy kill, that in order to cover this up, they had to pay them. And that this guy claims that there was cash, the 150 billion, and that his other inflammatory claim is that Biden essentially set up that SEAL team several months later. SEAL Team 6, remember, there was about 20 of them or 30 of them killed in a helicopter, which was, by virtue of the evidence was
revenge.
Kind of
it was
setup.
Payback. Yeah.
Well, it was to keep supposedly to keep them silent.
And also to keep them silent.
However, there's other evidence so that the guys that were killed, that the guys in the SEAL Team 6 that were killed in that helicopter weren't actually the same guys that were on the raid. So, a lot of this is sort of, he's got some tapes out that where they're talking to a congressman about, a meeting with Biden. So stay tuned is basically it. This guy's supposed to be dropping evidence, but this is all a little bit murky.
Well, and this is bad timing for this to come out, because while I appreciate that it's coming out before the election, if everybody waits to drop their bombshells the same freaking week, we don't hear about any of them. So it's a little bit ridiculous.
This is coming out right now.
This shit should have come out months ago. The Biden shit should have come out the Biden
why is this suddenly
Biden
coming
stuff
out now? That's the most.
Well, it's everyone's like, well, let's wait till right before the election. And now there's
voted.
A lot of people have already voted, but also it's too many stories. It's like releasing all the blockbuster movies on the same weekend. You're a freaking idiot. All right. Anyway, so we'll end there. Next week, I'm sure there will be more.
That's sort of our conspiracy segment too. We should play that conspiracy music.
Oh, okay. Conspiracy watch. Raul.
There you go. That was a good simulation. Good job.
All right. Well, thanks for joining me, Doug. And we'll see y'all next week. Tell us what you want us to talk about. Did we miss some news? I wouldn't be surprised if there's a story I've missed because A, I can't get the news in the normal way because it's all being suppressed. And B, there's so much going on. It's hard to keep track of it all.
I want to know what happened to the caravan.
Oh, what? Yes, the caravan.
Remember
the Honduras
that?
caravan. Yeah.
We never got to the bottom of that.
So much going on. All right. Have a good week, everybody. We'll talk to you next week.
There is a house called the House of Sunny. It's filled with satire and fun. It's been the demise of bad ideas, and we'll know what's right when she's done. So download this free podcast now and give perspectives you may lack. It's concise and right and achieves world peace, guaranteed all your money back.